Good evening, everyone. Wonderful to see you this evening. I'm Roberta Longley, Chair of the Climate Action Committee, and tonight is the final evening of our three-part series on climate action, local climate action, meaning what are some of the things we can do as individuals and as a community to fight climate change. Just so you know, this is a public meeting and we are being recorded. You can see the event probably tomorrow on the town website and also on the local TV channel. So tell your friends. Tonight we want to hope to accomplish two things. First of all, to acquaint you with our Climate Action Committee and share with you some of the areas that we've been focusing on over the past year. And then also to open up the conversation with you all to get a sense of what you feel is important in our fight against climate change in our community of Eastham. Well, just a little background. Our committee was formed about a year and a half ago by the Eastham Select Board. And our primary charge given by the town is, first of all, to make recommendations to the Select Board and to communicate with residents on ways that we can implement the town's commitment to reducing our carbon footprint. And the second piece of that is to help in finding ways we can reduce our vulnerability to the potentially devastating consequences of climate change. We are a 7-member committee. And I think it's a great team, a lot of deep skills and strong passion for the subject. We do have a vacancy right now. We do have a spot to fill. So if you are finding yourself more interested in working on local action, you might consider visiting one of our meetings and perhaps finding out more if there might be something up your alley. Now I'd like to introduce a member of Eastham Select Board, Jerry Sarazal. He is our designated liaison for our committee. Can you help me welcome Jerry?
Thank you, Roberta. Thank you all for coming here. As you know, a little over a year ago, the Select Board created this committee to try and think about ways that Eastham can help improve the situation in our own small way on climate change, and also how to prepare for it from a town standpoint. So the town has done many things in the sense of putting up solar panels, etc., but there's still a lot to do. And I think the big push from the town, first thing I want to do one thing. Thank you, committee. I mean, really thank you. And if somebody out there wants to take that open seat, I'll vote yes if you get your name in so we can get you on there. But the town was concerned about climate change, as we all are, and especially when you live on a sandbar stuck 40 miles out into the North Atlantic. Climate change is very, very important for Cape Cod, and I think the committee is the region a step for the town to do it. One of the things that's difficult here is you look at climate change and saying, what can we do? What can a town of only 5,000 people do to help climate change? So I just want to leave you with one thought. Listen to what they have to say. Try and see what you can do, because we can't do everything the earth needs, but the earth needs everything we can do on climate change. So thanks for being here. Thank this committee. This is important. It means a lot. I mean, look, I'm old. So climate change is going to affect me, but not as much as my grandchildren. So what we want to do is get it right, and let's get it going. Thank you very much, Roberta. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. From now on, I'm going to be staying put, and we're all just going to have an informal conversation here. And so to make it simpler, we're all going to stay in our places. Jerry, thank you. It's really your support, the Select Board's support really means a lot. And I think it really is kind of a symbol of the commitment the town has made towards trying to make an effort in this area. And seeing that we need to be proactive. We all agreed among ourselves that we would tell you all a little bit about ourselves and how we ended up on this committee. And so I will be the first. Like most of us, for years and years, climate change has loomed in my mind as something important and clearly potentially devastating for our planet and for us. But I always felt a bit powerless. I think a lot of people feel that way, that it seems like such a large issue that's handled on the national or the international stage. But then COVID hit. And that kind of turned something in my head. It was a strange thing. I saw that just a virus could affect society the way it did. It just turned everything on its head. And I said to myself, if a virus can do that, can you imagine what climate change means to our planet and to our way of life? At that time when I started thinking about this, I had the opportunity to get involved in a local effort. There were 14 towns on the Cape that had citizen petitions to create resolutions or bylaws in their towns to declare a climate emergency. And that basically you have the slide there. The resolution was that the town, the particular town would do everything that was feasibly and economically possible to move the town towards eliminating the use of greenhouse gases in the town or significantly reducing them. So there was a band of about 3 or 4 people in Eastham that worked to encourage the town committees and so on and so forth to promote this resolution. And it actually passed at the town meeting in September 2020. That, to me, was really a sign that people can make a difference. It was a small thing, but it really nudged the town in a direction. So I felt empowered, I guess, by that, where before I felt pretty powerless. And this kind of made me feel, hey, we can do something. 6 months later, the Select Board established the Climate Action Committee. And that's where we stand today. Now I'm going to pass it on to Cheryl Gale, and she's going to share a bit about herself and also introduce our other members who will be talking about some of the key areas that we have been working on over the course of the year. And those areas are, first of all, recommendations relating to the North Eastham Village project, and the topic of environmental justice. The third is partnering with the Recycling Committee on the possibility of town composting. And then the fourth is the promotion of residential solar and battery initiatives. I will pass it on to Cheryl, and we will get started.
I look around the room and I recognize a lot of faces. So I moved to Eastham in 1995, and I'm a proud Washershore, and I vacationed here before that. And I'm always one to believe when you can to get involved, with your town. How I got involved with this committee, I so-called retired from my profession in the fall of 2019. And I was going on a trip of my number one bucket list. And I knew that when I came back, I wanted to get involved with something with the town. I wasn't quite sure. So I just say this only because I had dreamed about this. I went to New Zealand for about 2 months right at the beginning of COVID. But that's another story. Who knew, right, when I got there that that was going to pop up. But while I was there, I mean, before that, I was aware of climate change, and similar to what, I just was overwhelmed, like, you know, I recycle, and, you know, what else can I do? And I try to vote right. But when I was in New Zealand, two things really happened. They were like ahead of the game in many areas, things that they were doing, like, you know how we got these water fountains up now in town, you know, where you can refill your, they were everywhere. And even stores and coffee shops were selling you recyclable cups. And I mean, that's just a little thing. And what they were trying to do to save the natural animals that belong there. But one day, because I was there partly on a tour and a lot on my own, I was wandering the streets of Wellington, which is their capital. And there was a sign outside a church that said, "Tonight, Climate Action Panel of Youth." So I said, oh, okay. So I went back. And I can't tell you how much that impressed on me, because it was various cultures, do you know what I mean? Really diversity of youth, and how powerful they were, speaking about being imperative about working on climate issues. And really, so I came back and, da-da-da. And then I ran into this band of bandits that were, working on this little small group of people who wanted to do something about climate change. And oh, she took it down. But we were involved getting that passed. So being somebody who really believes about thinking globally, act locally, when the time came for the selectmen to form a committee, I chose to do that. So with that, my role tonight, I'm not promoting any one thing. I have the lovely job of being the timekeeper. Okay, so if you see me nudging somebody, I'm not being rude or disrespectful, but we really want to be respectful to the library. We need to really be out of here by 1:15. Okay, and so we're going to have different topics, and then they're going to all speak, and then we're going to save your questions till they're done speaking. And then after that, we have 2 questions for you, just to help generate conversation and to hear from you. So without further ado, Roy?
Thank you, Cheryl. Well, it's 1:15 now, so can you just... Okay, dismiss the class. My name's Roy Maroli. We purchased a house here in Eastham in 1996. I guess that house will live in infamy. It's that house that burnt down in 2014, winter of 2014, and we rebuilt it. And I learned a lot about building when we rebuilt that house. And I was, when I think back on it now, I'm surprised at how far ahead the architect was in terms of thinking about climate change. And this was back in 2014-15. I guess everybody, why do they get involved in climate change? If you have grandchildren, there's no ways you can avoid it. I was going to cut down some trees, and my 7-year-old granddaughter said to me, "No way, Pappy, no trees are coming down." And we listened to her, and she was right on in terms of regenerative, in terms of oxygen here on Earth. But I'm going to talk about our initial work, which focused on recommendations for, at first it was a new town center plaza, and then a master planner was engaged, and some of you may have come to sessions here with Union Studio, right, where they gave updates on their master plan work. When we learned that the town was going to do a master plan, not only on the town center plaza, but also on Tea Time property and also the Council on Aging properties. So we expanded our thinking for all 3 properties, hopefully coming up with recommendations that could apply to all of them in one way or the other. We had 3 guiding principles. Are we up there?
We are.
Okay. One was Eastham's strategic plan. There's one section of our plan that calls for a clean environment and a resilient community. And that's strategic plan strategy package number 1. So we followed that where we could. Another one was climate justice or environmental justice. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. It's become a more used term when it comes to climate action today. And it's a concept that became more known, the 2021 Climate Action Conference that's run by United Nations. And this one was in Scotland. And I knew somebody who went there, and he brought back material on that. But basically, the bottom line here is climate justice calls for plans and investments to offset the social and financial impact of climate transition measures on residents, workers, and families. For example, solar panels, there's Mass Solar as a program now to help you get solar panels. Our third area that we studied was design and construction recommendations. Basically, criteria for planning and developing major new construction projects and any major renovations. There were 3 of them: sustainability, resiliency, and net zero or energy neutral. Now, with respect to sustainability, that's a process that calls for resource efficiency throughout a building's life cycle: building, construction, operation, maintenance. When you come in this library and look to your left, you'll see a plaque. This library is certified LEED Gold. That means a lot of work went into making this building a much more sustainable one. Resiliency is obviously when we talk about a facility that's able to withstand intense natural and man-made disasters. Unfortunately, we saw a good amount of that in Western Florida a couple weeks ago. And the last one was net zero or energy neutral facilities. And these are facilities that consume only as much energy as they produce, if not less, from renewables that do not emit carbon emissions. So that's a net zero term that we've become familiar with. Okay, I have 16 seconds. All right,
We'll give you 20.
all right. Okay, you're going to hear comments from my colleagues tonight on landscaping, native plantings that are regenerative. You're going to hear comments on passive, more detail on passive heating and cooling systems. For example, reflective roofs. New York City today, if you look around, you'll see, if you go down there, a lot of white roofs. I think the last one I want to mention is effective wastewater management processes. The only reason I mention this one is we're talking about here is putting plants, gardens on a roof. This idea comes from Deerfield Academy. They put a green roof there. I went there, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and the campus I was working at the time was building a technology center. And we got the architect to include a green roof. And it not only helped with wastewater management, but it was used for botany and in environmental studies courses. And we got so much support and help from students. and that's what Cheryl mentioned, young people. Young people understand climate action. I'll shut up now.
Thank you. It's tough because we could all probably talk 15 or 20 minutes, so we're just really giving you the Reader's Digest version and then hope this prompts more dialogue. Tom?
Okay, good evening. My name is Tom McNellis. I'm the youngest, well, the most recent member of the committee, so still learning.
You might be the youngest also.
Yeah, I think he is.
And we've been, my wife and I have been taxpayers here for 10 years and moved in full-time 3 years ago. And the reason I'm here is just the love of the area, and as Jerry said, this little stand spit in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean that is very vulnerable. And how do we preserve that? How do we keep what we know as our way of life here and also keep it affordable? So that's, to me, a big part of that. And Roberta asked me to talk about climate justice, and that's probably the topic I know the least about, because as an engineer, that's not something I studied. But in a nutshell, it's basically, and Roy talked about it a bit, it's that everyone has the right to a clean environment. And going a little bit further, everyone has the right to get benefits from the policies and to have a voice in the policies that are being put together right now to help preserve that environment. And so the question, I think, is what does that mean for us here on the Cape? And something that was mentioned 3 weeks ago by Rich Delaney, who spoke at our first workshop, really caught me. It really shocked me. He put up a chart that said the U.S. is like 2 or 3 times worse than other countries in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, greenhouse gas pollution. And at first I said, well, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, we're big, right? And we're a big powerhouse of industrial, power in the U.S. and the nation and the globe. But he then said, no, these numbers are per capita. So we're actually 2 to 3 times the per capita per person carbon pollution as France, as Italy, as Japan, as the EU. And so that really started my thought process of why are we so bad? I thought we were doing, all the good things that we need to do. We're always leaders in the world, right? Well, not in carbon and greenhouse gas pollution. And the numbers that you see up on the chart, as I looked at it a slightly different way and gathered some data, looked at it by income. And these charts, and I can't remember, it's One Earth is the publication, so you can go look that up. But they did it by income level, and the top 10% of the earners in globally contribute more than half of the greenhouse gas pollution globally. So that's pretty stark. And it's even more stark when the data shows that in the U.S., that means middle class. Middle class is actually in that top 10% globally, middle class and upper class. So what are we doing? What's happening here? The click wasn't happening in my mind. So looking further, it's really the things that we spend it on, transportation being number one, and consumerism being the other piece of it. There was an article in the New York Times just yesterday, and in the COVID era, we spent in the U.S. $4 billion in throwaway furniture. That's like astounding. So think about it, all the energy it took to create that furniture, to ship it to a store, to get it overnight delivered right to you on the next day, and then 12 months later throwing it out and putting it into the landfills. So the missing link is energy, right? Everything that we do is really using energy, and energy, for the most part, today anyway, we don't have as much renewable in the grid as we'd like. That energy is somehow related to greenhouse gas pollution. And what do we do about it? There's actually some simple things to do, and Jerry mentioned, we can't do everything that Mother Earth needs, but everything we can do, the Earth needs. And the World Health Organization calculated that if 1 in 5 swapped one car trip to cycling each week, it would be an 8% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by cars. The EPA said that if 1 in 10 buys Energy Star appliances, that would be the equivalent of 1.2 million cars annually taken off the roads. And by the way, you save $500. So take some smaller steps. I'm not going to go through all the smaller steps here, but some of my favorites are don't idle at sunset, turn off your car. Don't idle at the transfer station, turn off your car. Washing cold water. And a big part is reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost. And we're going to talk compost in just a minute. So be a smart consumer. Then the next page here talks about what you can find, and a lot of this applies to income justice and climate justice as well. Go to Cape Light Compact. It talks about all these things mass save. There's a lot of incentives out there. Some of these are income related, but take advantage, get a home energy audit. Insulation is a big deal. Up here we have a lot of old houses that aren't very well insulated. You can save a lot of money and a lot of greenhouse gas pollution that way. So I think we'll be posting some of these slides, Roberta, hopefully. So you'll be able to see the details, but again, if you go to Cape Light Compact, you'll see a lot of that right there.
Thanks. Well, as Roberta said, this is all being recorded, so if there's things you're not catching and you want to see the slides, all you'll have to do is go to the town website, and then you can scoot through it and see what you need. Our next member is Alan.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for coming. I'm Ellen Greer. I'm an Eastham homeowner and resident since 2019. We moved here from Berkshire County, where we had a hobby farm that we used animals for clearing and composting, etc. I've always had a keen interest in the environment and climate. I'm an avid downhill skier. And really, I mention that because about 10 years ago, I really observed a dramatic difference in snowfall, in the type of snow, in the temperature, from all around. We've skied all around North America and in Europe too. So that has helped drive me to want to do something. And I was attracted to the Climate Action Committee, basically because it had the word action in it. So my prime interest really is to engage with the community in ways to mitigate climate change effects and build a sustainable, resilient Eastham, hopefully with all of you. So the first thing that we did was we partnered with the Recycling Committee, who had already done some work on looking at a compost program for Eastham. Now, I've been a backyard strict composter for 25 years, and am a big fan. I never, ever have rotting food in my garbage, so it doesn't smell. So we joined with the recycling, as I said, and we developed a survey. They actually wound up being 2 different surveys. We had 258 people responded to our surveys. And what we found was that the respondents were really enthusiastically in favor of a drop-off program at the transfer station. There was really a lot of great information that we got from the surveys. I guess that's up there, right? People say that they would like to know standards on best practice and some practical know-how of composting. Most people haven't really thought about food waste as a contribution to greenhouse gas. It's methane that's discharged from rotting food in the trash and in landfills. The survey said that people's greatest concern about is attracting pests and rodents to compost bins. Let's see, we can go to the next one. So lots of people already have compost at home, but would like the option to drop off scraps and receive composted soil in the spring. Instructions for proper use is important for managing compost, so education is key. And I think it'd be important to debunk some of the myths of pests overrunning the town. In the 25 years that I've been doing an open compost heap in my yard, I've never, ever, ever had a problem with rodents. And so I think it's really just more of proper use and a good system. As we know, Eastham is vulnerable to coastal erosion, and the more biomass on the ground could help mitigate land loss. Climate change is really on everybody's mind now at this time. Composting is not going to eliminate climate change, but it's one way that we can do something to decrease, greenhouse gas emissions. It also saves money for the town, so we figure there's about 30% of the weight of the trash is food scraps. And so if those were eliminated out of the tonnage of, so you remember this is a transfer station, so it takes it and it trucks it off the Cape, someplace far away. Wrap up, please. Oh, I was just getting going.
I know you're passionate about this.
But anyway, so it'll save the town money, it will create some nutrient-rich soil and more biomass on the earth. And that's all I have to say right now. Thank you. But there'll be more to come. And this is-
And
Standing up.
our next person is Mike. And he already said I can say,
Let me know, I'll pull up the microphone. Been here since '95, built a home in 2005, retired in 2016, been retired since then. One of your reps to Cape Tech, the other one's over there, Yasmin McNellis, whom I recruited, and I recruited this guy as well, and Melissa Lowe recruited me for the Climate Action Committee.
So be careful when Mike comes knocking at your door, yeah.
So my motivation was, I have a good-sized vegetable garden, decent-sized property. I have some fruit trees, I have berries, and I saw what was happening with the climate and our non-resilient grid infrastructure, and had lost a lot of food that I had spent a lot of time preserving and storing and freezing due to all the grid outages we were getting. So I wanted to put a stop to that, but I also wanted to have a green solution too, because I knew that was feasible at the time. In 2018, I invested in a solar system with a backup battery, and I've been what I consider net plus since, because I don't like the term net zero, because I think not everybody can be net zero, because we need to make up for people that can't be, so I like to be net plus. So I make more than I use, and I donate the excess, which is one thing you can do in Massachusetts. So Housing Assistance Corp gets some of the offset of their electric bill because of what I produce over what I use. So I was willing to invest in the technology. I saw it coming, and it was time to come up with something. And right now I can, again, when we have an outage, I stay live because my solar panels will continue to work. The battery will power my furnace, my well pump, since I'm on the last phase and I don't have town water yet, my refrigerators, lights, internet, and you don't hear running outside my window. I don't have to worry about changing the oil with the filter, having it run once a week, so anyway, so I like that green solution. I invested in, I have 24 panels on my roof, and I have a 16 kilowatt hour battery. And that 16 kilowatt hour battery will take us over 24 hours when the grid goes down, even in the middle of the winter. And if I can still use the sun with the panels, I can go for several days without worrying about the grid coming back online. So to me, that's a green solution. Now, it's not cheap, all right? I'm a retired engineer, I did well, I could afford it. It's like buying another car. But that car gets used every day, not like the other two that I have in my garage, all right? So that was, to me, the best investment I made, in addition to helping the environment I also drive an electric vehicle, which I didn't say, so I charge my electric vehicle at home, so I pay $0 to drive. Well, I pay zero. Of course, I paid another car in 2018 to provide all of our power, so I don't have to pay to drive the car today. What's interesting, though, is that even without solar, without solar, you could argue that driving an electric car is still, obviously using, since most of our energy comes from, right now, natural gas burning generators, in the Northeast, some hydro, but mostly natural gas. You say, well, geez, you're driving that car, but that car is still using power and being charged by power that came from a natural gas burning, generator. Well, the difference is that if you look at all the cars on the road, all right, you look at all the pollution those cars emit where they are in place, all right, versus one spot that's generating energy that I can control, in many cases, the stack emissions. Right, so it's a lot easier to control emissions from a high-power plant, which is much more efficient, by the way, than what we drive with an internal combustion engine. And the internal combustion engine is spewing pollution all over the place, whereas that one plant is localized. So you could argue that even if you're not doing solar like I do, that still driving electric vehicles is better for the environment. Okay, next. If you want to look up some of my typical performance, I make, just in 2021, I made about 8.8 megawatts of power in a year. I only used about 7.6 megawatts. So again, that addition went to help out some other places where it could be used. In a typical day, you can see the sun comes up, you build power, you store that power or use that power, and then at night, you can run the battery in two different modes. I choose to run mine in Massachusetts in backup mode because the net metering opportunities we have in Massachusetts make it more efficient to do that.
Mike, 1 minute.
Whereas in Texas, which our second home is, because we've got a couple little guys that we don't see unless we go to Texas, and so we spend some time there. I have another system in Texas which has solar and battery, and I run that in self-consumption. So I'm like 92% off the grid. Only 8% of my power comes from the grid at any given time because I run solar during the day, and overnight the battery kicks in and takes us through the night. And that powers my whole house in Texas. It's a lot smaller. Okay, continue. So, what are the pros? As I mentioned before, self-consumption and backup. The pros are I have no electric bills. I haven't had an electric bill since June of 2018 in either Massachusetts or Texas. But it cost me a car. All right, it's like buying a car in today's prices. So you got to be willing to make that investment if you can afford it, and if not, I maintain, by the way, is if half the homes on Cape Cod, most of which are unoccupied most of the year, just put solar and a battery, the entire Cape would be net zero, easily. Okay. Did I finish in time?
You did.
Good.
Perfect timing. Thank you. So now, this is the time, we're going to take a few minutes if people have any questions for any of us. Do you know how to turn this?
Oh, sorry.
Be right with you. First, and then we'll come up here. Comments, whatever you like.
Well, first I wanted to say thank you for all the work that you're doing and the commitment to this, and it's really exciting to see that word action in there, and you guys are really moving forward on the action, so thank you all for doing that. Question, when you were kind of visioning this and were there any communication with other town action committees that are energy and climate action committees, and could you speak to that?
Sure. I am one individual on the committee that's been involved with a multi-town climate action group. It encompasses Orleans all the way up to Provincetown. And we have met regularly every other month or so on. And it's been really useful for me, and I pass it on to my committee, to learn what every committee, every town is different in terms of what they're working on, what they're focusing on. It is such a large subject, climate change, but it's all good work, and we get ideas from each other. So yes, the answer is yes, we are communicating.
We also participate in do you call it? The group that meets, the Cape Cod Climate
Climate
Action Network,
Collaborative.
collaborative.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And they meet regularly, and we participate with that. No,
Nothing.
just talk.
Yeah.
If I want good information on solar, can I apply to your committee in Eastham, or how do I, everyone is selling it, but I'd like some good information from the town.
On what?
Possible?
On solar?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I mean, I put together a sheet, but I don't think it's available yet. That list of all contacts and connections but I'd be happy to, anybody's interested, I'd be happy to talk about what the incentives are. I mean, I know some of the incentives, they change every year because, well, actually now, with the Biden administration, they've gone back up again. But when I put my system in, I only paid 2/3 of what the system actually cost. And I've already reaped half of that back in 4 years. And so,
I have to say, we had a table at Windmill Weekend, and the questions that came to us on that day were practically all about solar panels and how to buy them or lease them. So there's so much interest. One thing that we want to do over the next few months is really to try to develop a good informational package, probably on the town website, we hope, for people just like you who would really like to understand how, what are the steps? Real information and when you can expect, a payback from your investment and all of that thing. So yes, that's something that we intend to do very soon.
And I think there's an email sign up, right? In the
Yeah.
room?
Yeah.
Do we have an email sign up so they can get on the list and get info as it happens?
Yes, that's one of the reasons we're asking for emails, because we'd love to be able to communicate some of the work that we're doing, including solar panels. So,
Was there somebody over here that had their hand up? There you go.
Yes, again, thank you for volunteering all this time. It's really been helpful. What did happen to the idea of leasing? We didn't really talk about that, and that seems to me to be a viable alternative if you don't have a whole lot of cash up front.
Leasing.
Leasing solar panels?
Yes.
yeah, there's several options. There's leasing options where the leasing company essentially reaps the government benefits, but they charge you for leasing the panels, and you get some benefit because of that. A neighbor of ours did just that. He leases his, not Tom, but Tom's neighbor, leases his panels, and he, what's that?
I lease them.
Yeah, okay, and he pays a fixed rate per month for that lease.
I think it's
and-
$40 a month.
Yeah, and he gets a benefit on his electric bill as well. But he doesn't own the panels.
Just got a bill from Eversource, negative $150.
That's it.
I don't know what that means.
And there's also community solar, all right, where what you do is you have a group of panels that are set up by a company, and that company basically contracts with you so that your power is basically using their panels. You're not really using the panels, but that's the deal they make with the utility, so that you're credited for buying power that solar, community solar generates for your neighborhood. So there's a bunch of different options other than just having to pay outright.
One thing to note is, as Mike said, the government benefits, which is the incentives that were listed on the slide that I showed, those you will not get if you rent the panels. The company if you lease them, the company that owns those will get those benefits. So you have to trade that off when you figure out, it's a difference of cash up front or leasing per month. Although I will say that Mass Save now has some very good incentives. They have zero interest loans, income-based qualifications, but you can potentially get even a better deal than leasing. You'd have to look at the numbers for your own situation, but those are very valuable.
Thanks. Way in the back, you're going to make me walk. I do need my steps. There you go.
I just want to thank you all for having this committee and giving out all this information. I heard a couple of people mention youth, and a person mentioned granddaughter. is there any way that we can connect with the local high school and stuff like that, so we can get some young idea, you know, you guys do great, but get some young ideas in that, so.
Well, it's funny you say that, because our committee actually had, about 3 weeks ago, we had spent about 3 hours trying to develop our goals for 2023. And we're still ironing that out and kind of finalizing how we're going to try to accomplish these things. But that certainly was one of the goals, was how to interact with the youth of Eastham, whether likely high school, but younger people in the community. So we're thinking through of avenues for that, whether it be educational programs or having them involved in the educational programs, whether it be, actually a young person serving on this committee. There could be many ways that we connect, but it's definitely one of our goals for 2023.
Yeah, if I can interject, one of the things we've talked about that started back at Windmill Weekend is we engaged with the Scouts. And the Scouts are interested in getting involved. And so one of the projects we talked about is trying to steal what this Wellfleet Bay Wildlife Sanctuary does, is putting up tide markers at all the beaches so people can understand when sea level will now cover the parking lot. And so the beach will no longer be there. So that's one of the projects we had talked about with the Scouts, is getting them involved to help with that.
So if people have any specific contacts with the youth, if you could be in touch with us, because that is, I'm one of the people who are going to follow up on that. So we'll take all your help.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because that was one of my thoughts too, is, just about how, maybe a survey to, the students here in Eastham, or those connections that you have through Scouts, and, or through your grandkids, what are the issues that they're most interested in too, because, led by them, there would be more engagement that way. And I'll just mention, Mass Audubon does have the Youth Climate Leadership Program that is statewide, but there is a Cape Cod version. And if there is ways, especially from the outer Cape, if you have connections with specific youth through Scouts or school like the tech, and you have a group of kids to help encourage them to get more engaged in something like that, because again, these are youth-led projects, youth-led advocacy and education, and that goes a long way, because as you said, this will be what they inherit, so.
Thanks. And we'll do this question, and then we're going to move on to our other question.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I noticed there was one of the slides. By the way, my name is Olav Hägglund, and I have lived here permanently since August of 2022. So I'm fairly new resident. We've been here, since for 20 years. But one of the slides mentioned reporting and measurement of carbon, and I'm very interested in that subject. And I'm trying to figure out, has Eastham done anything in terms of identifying a carbon inventory or a greenhouse gas inventory? Like, what is our baseline, essentially?
Well, I think the answer is no if you're thinking about an inventory of the entire town. I do know that the town of Eastham had to do an inventory of the municipal use of, equipment and vehicles and buildings and so on. When they applied to become a green community, they had to inventory and send that with their application. It actually is a very good idea. I understand there are ways to inventory for a town. It is complicated, and maybe there is a place for that in the climate action planning for the town. It's definitely, there's a placeholder for that, but how to do it and to have the expertise to do it?
Right.
There is a Cape-wide inventory that was done based upon the number of homes, the occupation of the occupational times of those homes, transitioning on and off the Cape, commuting versus people that live here. So there's a whole inventory that came up with the numbers that we showed you in the pie chart, and that's where the 55% comes from. 55%, and that's, by the way, statewide, it's only more like 30%. We're the highest in the state in terms of pollution due to automobiles and light trucks. So.
I was actually surprised to see that.
Yeah, well, statewide, again, we're more like 30, but us in Barnstable County, our 55% comes from what we drive.
Also, probably because we don't have a lot of
Yeah,
industry
exactly.
here.
Right, exactly, right.
Yeah. And we all know we can't turn left on Route 6 in the summer, right?
Could you go back to the other question, please? So now what we'd like to do is spend a couple of minutes. We want to pose some questions to you all, to give us the feedback and for us to kind of do a group think. And so the first one is, what specific hazards relating to climate change are you most concerned about while you live or work here? We don't necessarily assume we know everything. So what are you concerned about?
Depletion of the fisheries.
Go ahead.
Depletion of our fishing occupation, I guess.
I'll add mine. I'm concerned about, so like the gentleman in the back, I became a full-time resident in August. I've been a pet taxpayer here since 2019, and I love it here. But I'm at a low point. I don't live high up, and a lot of marshes. And I'm concerned about the loss of our marshes and sea level rise and groundwater rising up. So that's my concern.
Oh, thank you. I'm also concerned about the decommissioning of this nuclear plant in Plymouth. It certainly is going to affect all of us, and I've heard very little about it. There's been very little protest except in Plymouth. Is that right?
I think we all go to Plymouth.
I'm concerned about that rotary that's only 5 feet above sea level, Jeremiah's gut, and if that cuts the whole Outer Cape off in an emergency evacuation, all right?
A lot of questions have come up about the lowlands here. And just from your information, I know that the town of Eastham has received funding from the state mostly to do some planning and some studies about our particular area, particularly the low-lying roads. And I don't think that the work is being done and the planning is taking place. I think the next step is to probably bring it a little bit more public so we can start the conversation on it. But I know that the town is aware of this, and it's... Oh, you're talking about the nuclear, yeah. Yeah.
Certainly concern everyone, not just the fishermen and the mussel collection people and, everyone.
Right.
I just can't understand, there seems to be very little control of radioactivity and very little interest because people don't seem to find they can do anything about it, which I suspect is the truth.
I think we have another comment
I-
in here.
Yeah, I guess my comment is around really two things. One is I'm obviously very concerned about what we're talking about, was the long-term impact of climate change. But there's also, honestly, last week with that 3 inches of rain in like 2 hours, which did things to like my dirt road, which I've never seen happen before. I wonder about, mitigating or addressing what the concerns of the increasing frequency of severe storms and erosion, like Thumpertown Beach. I think the part of the parking lot collapsed in that storm last week. And it just seems to me that, well, I know for a fact that there's going to be a lot more storms, a lot more severity of storms, a lot more frequency. And, we're going to see these 100-year storms every 10 years now or something. And, is that within the mandate of your committee to kind of addressing the short-term mitigation of and addressing, what impact is the severity of erosion going to have on our beaches and our tourism and our enjoyment of the town, as well as the longer term, so the solar and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, it's certainly
What do you
within
vote?
our purview in terms of, you know, trying to help the town move forward on that through our recommendations and our work with the select board and working with the public and bringing it out in discussion. I mean, obviously, the town has some responsibility relating to that in terms of understanding what the parameters of how we can protect ourselves and what we need to do. A committee can't do that, but we can certainly be advocates for it.
And one other area, I guess I just had a question about the presentation was, you had mentioned the master plan and you were going to make recommendations. I was just wondering, curiosity where you were with those recommendations. Is that something you've already made, or is that something you're just developing?
Right.
We did make the recommendations. We've shared our recommendations with the select board, and we have also shared our recommendations with the master planning company. So they're aware of them. It's going to be a while before this plan is completed, and it's going to be a while before any implementation is done. Because one of the major points of this process is getting developers to undertake and operate the facilities. And it's really a public-private plan, but there's got to be oversight, close oversight of these developers when they go through the selection process and when they're selected. But that's a good ways in the future.
Also, our intent, and as we gave these general recommendations and what we were told is, at some point, they will be putting, putting out, not a request for proposal, but like a request for work or something like that. And that's when the details really happen. And so we're very involved in staying on top of that, saying, because that's when we're going to also want to be able to sit down and when whoever, the staff write it, to say, okay, where are you at with this? This is what we think needs to happen. And we're in communication with the selectmen and with Jackie. And so it's a process. So they got broad ones for us. And now once we see the final plan, we're going to get in there and get more specific.
Thank you. One of the things that I'm most concerned about, particularly with increasingly elderly population here, is not the cold, but the heat. And the irony here is that as the world gets hotter, we're going to need to air condition more days per year, and there's really no getting around that. I mean, you can also often say, well, I don't run the air conditioning in my house. It's not really going to be the case for a lot of people who could easily overheat. Certainly not the case in restaurants or in office buildings or anything else like that. So one of the sad parts about or that I'm concerned about is not only things getting hotter and the associated changes to the ecosystem that might occur as a result of that, but also that then because of the heat, you're actually going to be using more energy, although some of that can be coming from renewable sources. Most of it is still going to be coming from at least natural gas, also oil, and I think there might still be some coal being used to generate electricity in Massachusetts. And just to sort of to follow on that, one of the comments is, I'm no fan of the Pilgrim nuclear power plant, but anybody discussing this issue internationally knows dead cold that if you are not talking about increasing nuclear energy, you're never going to do anything about climate change. It is one of the single most efficient, not to say it isn't dangerous or there aren't risks, but it is one of the single most efficient energy sources that you can have anywhere in the world by 1,000-fold. Now, I'm hoping that we're going to get to nuclear fusion, that there are obviously other alternatives like hydropower that doesn't damage the ecosystem. There may be opportunity for hydropower around whole cities, and it may kind of serve this funny dual purpose. You could build essentially seawalls that would protect a city from severe flood events during storms, and at the same time, that same seawall could have turbines built into it, so the rest of the time, it's just holding back the high tide and then generating energy on the low tide. And with all of these things, yeah, it reminds me of an article I read 20 years ago. I'll stop going on in a minute. An article I'd read 20 years ago, at least in Time magazine. It was a picture of Kermit, and it said, "It ain't easy being green." And it really isn't. We are getting there, but even with, I was talking before with the gentleman here who's, I'm sorry, name I've forgotten, Gary, about electric vehicles. Yeah, they do have, even with all of the production, development costs, cradle-to-grave stuff, shipping, they still do have a better profile than gasoline cars, but not that much. I pulled in tonight, I drive a Honda Civic that gets 41 miles to the gallon, and not to indict anybody here, but there were a lot of very big vehicles in the parking lot. So there's something we all can do in that respect as well. Even the other thing that I try to do is I try to plan my trips a little bit. I wouldn't say it's primarily because of energy. It's certainly because of how little time I have. I'm a very busy guy. So I try to say, how many things can I knock off in one trip so I can, essentially stack all of my responsibilities and get them all done at once. But that's something else we can do. In the end, there is no getting away from the fact this is a very tough issue. It's going to be a long time before the technologies that we all dream about will catch up to our current status in society so that we can actually be using things that truly are green, that truly are safe. But we got a long way to go. And I think we have to be open to things that we might not like nuclear power and other sorts of things that we may like in order to try to reduce our carbon footprint. And a big one for us is driving. So if we can all drive higher efficiency cars, or for those of us who have the money, maybe you have the bigger vehicle for the kids and the grandkids or whatever, but you keep small vehicles around for all those local trips, or even small electric cars, whatever, the low car, that kind of thing. It's a panoply of things we have to do.
And as it turns out, being a smart consumer and saving money is also saving greenhouse gas pollution. And we love our cars, right? That's one of the big differences between us and Europe. I know we don't have a lot of options, and one of the things we're talking about is, and the town's talking about, is how to provide alternate transportation and make the roads more efficient. But if you concentrate on, like you were saying, being more conscious about not taking as many trips, we can save quite a bit, actually.
I just want to clarify, there's no coal-fired power in Massachusetts, no. It hasn't been since even 2016, 2017. So 46% natural gas, 23% nuclear, 6% hydro, 3% wind, 2% solar. That's our makeup as of 2021. 46.
Tom, can we have the last question, just because? Okay, so we're going to focus on this, fossil fuels for transportation and heating. What do you think, as a community, we should do to reduce our use of this? Because this is one of the major, when we did our planning for the next year, reducing fossil fuels was, for transportation, rose high to one of our focuses. So we'd like to hear from you what you think as a town, as individuals, we can do. I think you started talking about it a little bit, is utilizing our cars less, kind of, I try to do that myself too, if I have to go to, well, I kind of did it anyways, but if I have to go to Orleans, how many things can I get done in Orleans instead of going back and forth 6 times, right? Can I get it done once? So what other kind of things can we do?
I don't understand the -9% for land use.
So that's, yeah, that's landscaping, right, exactly. That's the more green we have out there in terms of landscaping and trees, the more carbon sequestration is happening naturally. So it's actually, it's a negative for us, which is
So
good.
it's giving us credit.
It's a negative, but it's a positive.
Yeah, it's a credit.
So it technically needs to offset everything on the left.
Right.
For us to have
Good point.
roll down and
Not going to happen.
Good point.
Right. One of the easier things to do. Keep your landscape natural.
Yep.
Don't
Food
plant
waste
grass.
is-
I mean,
yeah.
everything, it's not one of the most important things to do, but it's one of the easier things to do.
And it kind of,
that's
I
people
think
can hear
there's, a real, especially for people coming in and, you know, moving in and after, like I did, after only having been on vacation here for years and years, I think there's a lack of information about how important it is
agree.
not to plant a lawn, not to cut down trees. I really think that after you see somebody clear cut their lot and then you go up and you try to talk to them about it, it's too late.
We talked a lot about that last week when we were here.
I do think absolutely individual responsibilities, you know, is really important, but I also would like to see perhaps the town lead by example, right? Through, you know, looking at conservation measures. I mean, and I don't know, I can't say to that, but I think even for those measures that are being taken within the town, promoting it more, educating, you know, shouting it to the rooftop, saying, look at what we're doing, right? Or getting a summary of how much, you know, energy are we using within the town, getting that budget, and then showing how you're knocking it down and really, and then showing the ways to make it happen. And I think leading by example will then also, you know, kind of spread out and perhaps inspire others. So, you know, perhaps this could also be, you know, a question brought to the town and figure what can we do, you know, to reduce and conserve.
Warming, earth warming. Where? Oh, thank you. Here you go.
One of the things I would like to see, and I realize this is kind of a bigger issue, but I don't personally think that biking and even walking in Eastham is particularly friendly. You know, when you get on sort of Herringbrook and some of these other roads, and the thought of crossing Route 6 with my bicycle really puts me off the whole idea. You know, if the bike trail was more accessible, I might, for instance, ride my bike to Orleans or something to run a quick errand, but I'm not going to do that under the current situation because I live on the other side of Route 6 from the bike trail, and I'm not going to.
Well, the bike trail crosses, so where do you live?
Well, yeah, I could go down, and you know, it involves me going all around and working my way underneath and getting back to the other side. But yeah, I understand, but that's one of the points. And also, I like probably many people here take a walk, and you know, I feel like I'm taking my life in my hands every time I have to go on one of the main roads to get to another road. Anyway, that's just a thought. And then it's sort of related to the master plan. This is a curiosity point of me. I wondered if any thought was given to sort of like a master plan-wide geothermal plant or something where, you know, heat and air conditioning could be supplied to the entire site from a central location. Because I've seen some documentaries and stuff where developers have put in, you know, sort of geothermal for the community where they're piping it into each home, and the advantages of that over, you know, geothermal just in an individual property.
Yeah, great idea.
Just because of time, we're going to do two more up front and then one in the back, and then I know Roberta wants to wrap up.
Just on biking and walking, there is a Safe Streets program that the town is looking at, have some plans to do it. We are very much aware of, you know, Bridge Road and the issues there. Trying to do something first, I think, might be coming down here on Samoset, and also looking at what we can do potentially on Route 6 as we go forward. So the town is looking at it. Everything is expensive, so you know, you look at it and you have to do it by steps. But it is being looked at. It's not safe to walk or ride in many areas of Eastham.
And then we're going to take one last question, comment.
I don't know a lot about this, but I've been in towns, Ellen mentioned ski towns and stuff, and have a free shuttle bus. So we have so many natural resources around here that we can shuttle folks that, you know, don't want to take their cars, if that's a feasible thing, you know. Just a thought.
Well, that's what the National Seashore does right now, you know, to Coast Guard. And the question is, when is it going to have to go not just Coast Guard, but also Nauset Light? And then when is it gonna have to be at First Encounter, Cooksbrook, and Sunken Meadow, and Thumpertown? You know, that's the question, is do we need to start doing that for all the town beaches?
Well, we could probably chat more about this, but I want to respect the library. They co-sponsor this with us, and they've been really a great partner with us and promoting us and helping us do all this. So I'm going to turn it over to Roberta.
Well, I hope you learned a little tonight about what we are attempting to do. And we certainly learned a lot about what is on your mind. And we didn't write it down, but we have the recording. And I can tell you that we're really going to take some of your suggestions
I
to
saw
heart.
Tom taking great notes.
Oh, all right, great. No, this has been really, really helpful. So let's stay in touch. I hope you've given us your email address so that on the occasion we have something to share with you, we can do that. Again, you're welcome to come one of our committee meetings. We meet once a month, usually on the second Monday at 5 o'clock. And you can also visit us by Zoom. You can attend that meeting by Zoom, which makes it really easy. And you find all that on the website.
Yeah, don't drive.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But you could bike
And
over.
we have an open seat, so don't all
And-
come at once.
We do need another member for our committee to be a full committee, so hopefully maybe we pique somebody's interest here.
We also hope to develop our climate action web page, and that is something, one of our goals this year is just to have something more informational for people, like, for example, the solar question. So, this is only the beginning, and we hope you stay involved, and the fact that you're here tonight shows that you take it seriously, and we want your,
Please reach out to us.
yes.